I'm Dr. Cassandra Chapman. I'm an associate professor specialized in the psychology of charitable giving, and I'm the lead researcher here at donorpsych.org. Today, I want to talk to you briefly about the role that the media play in shaping philanthropic responses to disaster appeals. Many of you would have seen the recent news footage about the devastating wildfires that have been ripping through Los Angeles and Southern California. And if you're a nonprofit trying to raise money for crises just like this one, then I want to share some research that we've done here in Australia with my colleagues Matthew Hornsey, Kelly Fielding, and Robin Gulliver. We conducted research on a similar crisis that occurred in Australia in 2019 and 2020, which has been dubbed the Black Summer wildfire crisis. Indeed, fires covered as much as 20% of the forest in Australia, and they raged for several months. In response to this, Australians donated over $640 million to wildfire appeals. My colleagues and I were interested in what exactly it was that encouraged people to be generous and support victims of a crisis like this. And so we conducted some research to understand this phenomenon better. So first we did a study where we surveyed Australians and we asked them a range of questions, and we also asked them about their own charitable giving in the past, and also specifically how much money, if any, they had donated to bushfire crisis appeals. Now, above standard demographics, things like gender, age, income, and how much people give in general to charities, we found 5 important factors that predicted how much they donated to bushfire appeals. In fact, these 5 factors explained 55% of the variance in the amount of money that people donated. These 5 factors were the scale of the disaster, whether they were personally impacted, so whether they themselves had been impacted or somebody they knew had been impacted, or they were afraid of being impacted by the crisis. Third, believing that climate change is influencing the environment. Fourth, the dramatic footage that they had seen in the news. And fifth, the stories of people affected. So we noticed that 3 of these key factors, the scale of the disasters, the footage they've seen in the news, and the stories of people affected, were all communicated to them through mass media. In fact, we asked people directly which factors influence not just how much they gave, but which charities they chose to donate their money through. And they told us that the information they'd received in the media coverage was the most important factor in electing which charity to support. In fact, they said this factor was more important than their friends and family or than direct communications that they had received from charities themselves. So collectively, what this study tells us is that people will report that information they receive in news coverage of disaster appeals and disasters affect how much they give to those crisis appeals. We were interested in understanding how the news coverage actually encourages people to become generous to these appeals. To do so, what we did was a kind of crazy analysis of all the media coverage of the event. So we had 3 months of news coverage for the Australian bushfire crisis, and we identified over 30,000 news articles, which we downloaded and we're able to conduct a textual analysis on. What this meant is that we could run both custom and integrated dictionaries from a software called Luke, linguistic inquiry and word count analysis, which allowed us to create dictionaries of particular concepts and identify the words that would be identified with those concepts. And then we could run it against these 30,000 articles to identify how common those concepts and those words were across the articles. What we found was that, of course, we found concepts like emergency, like heroes, and human loss were all very common concepts and words that were used in these news articles, and the type of thing we would have expected. But what we found that was interesting was that 74% of those news articles included words related to the concept of support. So that's words like donate, fund, and support. Then we found that words related to the concept of money were even more common, and we were able to compare how frequently words associated with money were used in the articles compared to everyday language. So a big corpus of other data that was coming from everyday written language. And we found that concepts, words and concepts relating to money were appearing in these news articles at almost twice the typical rate. So what does that tell us? At a high level, it tells us that these news articles were, in fact, specifically talking about money and support in the articles. And what we think that means is that the news coverage is actually playing a kind of agenda-setting role in disaster giving. So not only are the media sharing the emergency and the raising awareness of the need, they seem to be directly talking about support and financial contributions as a sort of normative response to the disaster, and therefore encouraging people to give. So what does this mean for busy nonprofit professionals? If you find yourself in a nonprofit working in disaster response, and you're looking to enhance the effectiveness of your fundraising campaigns, one of the best things you can do is potentially lobby news providers and encourage them to talk about the event, but specifically to talk about your charity and the work that you're doing in relief, as this will likely contribute to individuals choosing to give their disaster support through your organization. So hopefully that is an interesting tidbit of research information for you that can be helpful in your own practice. If you found this useful, please visit www.donorpsych.org to find more short videos and articles summarizing the latest research on the psychology of giving. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.